Hey everyone, today I'm joined by Juliana Marulanda. Juliana is the founder of ScaleTime and a sharp operator known for turning chaotic agencies into clean running, profit generating machines. She has worked with over 1,500 digital agencies, helping them scale without burning out their teams or themselves. I brought Juliana on because many agency problems aren't marketing or sales issues, they're operational ones in disguise. And if your data is messy, then your onboarding sucks, your project timelines keep slipping, you're leaving serious money on the table. She breaks down how to fix that. In this episode, we discuss how your data is a process and why dirty data breaks your decision making, how to figure out which numbers really matter at your stage, the house of management model to align metrics across your team, and more. No one was asking for another community, but I've made one anyway. So what's different? The dynamic agency community is designed around access rather than content. Access to peers who've done it before. Access to experts who've designed solutions. Access to resources that have been battle tested. And right now, the price for founding members is only $97 a year. Join today so your agency has immediate access to everything you need to grow. You can join at dynamicagency.community. And now, Juliana Marulanda. It's easier than ever to start an agency, but it's only getting harder to stand out and keep it alive. Join me as we explore the strategies agencies are using today to secure a better tomorrow. This is Agency Forward. What's a common process bottleneck that keeps agencies from growing?
So I would say you have your regular bottlenecks, right? Project management is a huge one, right? Like I often say you can 4x your capacity just by fixing your project management without having to get a bigger team. Client onboarding is like the redheaded stepchild of poor processes that doesn't usually take a lot of time to do, but people ignore it. And that can 2x your retention. So I think that's a really big one. And I think one that we're diving in, especially depending on how big the maturity level is also your data. Your data as a process, which I know you might not think of data as a process, but it is a massive bottleneck because I don't know how many times I ask agency owners, simple stuff like, hey, what's your profit margin? And then they're like, maybe they know, maybe they don't know, right? And then I ask them, what's your profit margin after you pay yourself, right? Like, what's your actual profit margin? Like that money that you have to reinvest. And then they're like, like that sometimes takes a little bit of thinking. Yeah, they're like, wah. And and that's like a P&L metric. Like in theory, someone should be keeping track of that, whether you're looking at it or not, right? But then there's things like, what does your client churn look like? What's your retention? How many, what's your revenue goal, right? So like everyone knows the revenue goal. I love this one. Everyone, they're like, this is what I want to make this year. This is what we made last year, right? Like that's a very top of mind. Often I'm like, profit is for sanity, revenue is for vanity, right? Like that's what they know. I'm like, okay, cool. Given your average deal size, how many deals do you need to close every month for the rest of the year to hit that goal, right? Like how do we quantify then it to be actionable? And the challenge, usually the bottleneck, is that one, there's dirty data, right? So your data is like all over the place. It's not being tracked. It's, it may or may not be accurate. Like I'm working with a client right now where like they do webinars. That's their whole agency. And they are so frustrated because the way that they've set it up, Go High Level, keeps rewriting their data. So they can't actually get booked calls. And they've got a really like solid sales team, but they don't know what the hell like the actual booked calls are, which is kind of a key metric, right? Yeah. So you've got dirty data. It's all over the place. Usually you don't have stuff for tracking. And nowadays you're like, well, if I just stuff it into ChatGPT, it'll give me the answer, right? It'll give you an answer, but you don't have a consistent process.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, there's so many ways we can get into this. I think data has become because of AI, all of these things, data is one of those areas that gives you a competitive edge. And a lot of people immediately take that as, yeah, if I have all this information about my clients and everything else, then I can sell better, I can market better, I can do all these things, but also just internal data. If you understand your metrics better than anything else, you now have options, right? Like you can go into that sales conversation and you know what you should be doing and or what wiggle room you have, like in order to sell this deal. You know, hey, if I add these things in, my team is going to be at capacity, and so I can't actually do that. Like without knowing those data points and having it clean, you can't do any of that, right? You lose all the benefits. How do you go about keeping, like, one, I guess, collecting the right data, but then two, actually maintaining that and keeping it clean so you avoid the dirty data that you brought up?
Yeah. So I think the first things first is you got to keep your data simple, right? And what I mean by that is it's almost like any process that you built. Whenever you're building any process, whether it's your project management, your client onboarding, your data processing, I'm always like habit before process. So you have to create habits around the thing that you want, right? So one, it's like, what data do you want, right? And is it booked calls, right? Like, and sometimes, and we have to keep it simple. So it's, if you're like, okay, well, I want to know our closing rate percentage year over year, or maybe quarter over quarter closing percentage increase or decrease, percentage change. Cool. You can't get that if you have no idea how many booked calls there are and and how many, and like how many of them you closed, right? So you can't get those numbers. You got to start with basics, right? And so like, what is your raw data that's then going to give you, right? If we're going to get like kind of nerdy with it, like your trends, or then your derived data, right? Like all that juicy insight stuff, you can't get it if you don't have the basics. So what are your basics? What are the basics that are important to you? And the basics that are important to you are going to be different if you're at, 500,000 versus if you're at 5 million versus if you're at 25 million, right? It's just, it's going to look a little bit different, obviously, because you're at different maturity levels, and data should support your decision-making. Right. So sometimes people are like, I want all the data. I want 200, inputs every single day. And it's like, whoa, remember, like each data point that you have to define it. You have to track it. You have to review it. And then, ideally you should be making decisions off of it. So I do not recommend trying to make decisions off of 200 data points. That's confusing, distracting. It's going to send you in 200 different directions. So, what is it that is really important to you where you can make confident decisions? I think that's step one. It's really identification. I think it's one of the hardest things for people. It's like, what do I need? So that's step one. Step two is then, okay, now we have to build a process around this, right? Like, how do we track it? Who's tracking it? Can we get the data? Can we not get the data? Right? NPS. I love NPS. NPS is such a great one for people who are like really trying to get into, your Net Promoter Score to see how clients are satisfied or not. It's a phenomenal piece of metric, but you got to build a whole system around it. Right? You have to go to the clients, survey the clients, figure out when you're going to survey the clients, make sure that you're not putting any other stuff so it's not leading, right? It's not like, by the way, we want your NPS and then testimonials. It's like you could do one and then the other, but, really making sure that the data is integral and clean and you have a process around it is another. When are you going to ask them? What's the percentage that you get back? How do you make sure you're not ignored? Right? How do you make sure, especially if you're dealing with bigger clients, that I had one client who didn't want to do an NPS because they're like, they use it against us. If we publish our NPS, right, and they're like, oh, you're doing so great, then it's great, but then it's like, how many clients do you have? Like, are you really servicing us? Right? Like, there's like all this emotional stuff around it. Or like, if you're not doing great, oh, well, you should lower prices. What are you doing? Right? It's really weird, but there's all this stuff that you have to think about when you identify which data point you want. So I would say identify it, make it simple, and then figure out a process for tracking. And then after you figure out a process for tracking, figure out how to automate it if you can. Sometimes you can't. I mean, most times you can, but it will take someone on the team or some knowledge to automate. And then lastly, you need to review, right? Like, I know a lot of clients that are data geeks and they geek out on data and then they never review it. It's such a waste of money.
Mm-hmm. Right. And if you never review it, is it really worth having in the first place?
No, it's like if a tree falls in the forest and no one hears it.
Yeah.
There
you go. So there are a lot of data points within an agency that you could be looking at. Do you break those down into responsibilities for key team members or like from your leadership team to be able to say, hey, head of ops, you're looking at these things, finance, you're looking at these things. And now you roll up the context to like turn this data into information and, that we can then use for our decision-making process. Like, I guess, how do you structure that?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a concept that I came up with called the house of management, right? So think about this as like a 3-story house. You can, imagine it in your mind. And we're there. Okay. And so there's a couple of ways. I mean, there's a lot of ways where data review or data feedback loops can go wrong, right? Especially for management. One is you've got data, you're like, all right, I'm going to have a performance, culture. I'm going to make sure that people, have, and then you can pick your metric system, OKRs, KPIs, rocks, blocks, whatever, right?
Yep.
You can, all of these are just metric systems, right? They're metrics for management. And so I'm pretty agnostic. I could always geek out on each individual one, but really it's you want to use metrics for management. Okay, cool. Now, if you at the top of the house, right? So like, let's say leadership, your founder, your CEO, like whoever, your co-founders, you have a vision, right? For that year or for that 5-year plan. And your metrics that you pick should be aligned for that, right? If you're in full growth mode, it could be revenue, it could be gross revenue, right? Like depending on what kind of business you have, depending on whether or not you're eating the ad spend or you're pushing it through or whatever, right? So, so you have your top, your metric as that are going to really fulfill on the vision, right? And what you're responsible for as a CEO, as a founder, as an owner. And then you have, okay, so like if I'm responsible for this, right? Like, and I'm going to use a top line metric just for funsies. If I'm responsible for revenue, then, in the second floor of the house, you've got your leadership, right? And so it's like, okay, maybe I may or may not have a sales team. What are they responsible for sales, right? Because that sales is going to flow into revenue. Mm-hmm. If I have HR, right? Or, some sort of ops manager. Are they responsible for hiring? How many hires? What's our time to hire? Right? Like, to make sure that we can fulfill on the revenue that we're going to expand on. If I have marketing, right? Let's say we're doing ad spend, like what's our ROAS? Right? Like, cause that's all going to feed into, what's our return on investment so that I know, and then I can start to calculate like revenue. If I have a production team or I have an ops manager, profitability. Right. So we want to make sure that those middle people that are reporting to you, if you have that layer, if not, then, you're kind of responsible for that layer as well. Right. But like, what are they like? What are their metrics that are going to feed into the top line metric? Right. So that we don't have the team going on all sorts of directions. We want to be all heading in the same direction. And then at the bottom, you have your junior contributors. Right. And if you're a tiny agency, it might just be in your junior contributor 1, right? Like, or it could be like you and a VA, or it could be you and like 3 VAs, right? Or you might have like a media buyer and a graphics person, right? So like, and this sort of scales down and scales up. right? Then your junior contributors, right? What are they responsible that's going to feed the middle, that's going to feed the top, right? So, because what we want is alignment. If you don't have alignment, and also like if you give people, like you're responsible for 20 metrics, that's 20 different directions that they're heading in, right? Like we want to be really succinct, and we want to have like power in that progress, that we're all heading in the same direction. So if you can kind of go, okay, what am I responsible for? And then chunk it down to what everyone is responsible for, and we're all aligned, right? Then we've got this house of management where now our metrics are aligned, and you have to have feedback loops, right? So like, what is your feedback? Are you meeting with people like once a month? Are you meeting them with once a quarter? Like these annual reviews, I think are getting very antiquated. Like business moves too quickly for us to wait an entire year to give someone feedback.
Yep.
It's just bad, right? Like most people, like there's informal feedback, like on Slack or on Teams or wherever you're communicating on a daily basis. But people do want more structured feedback, especially if they're top performers. And you want to give those top performers like praise. And you also want to give them bigger things to work on. You want to challenge them. And so those feedback loops are super important.
Yep. Two key things that I want to dive into from this. So first, I guess this is more of just a concept that I used to play with, was if you have someone responsible for like 20 metrics, right, or 10 metrics, just a simple like reframing for this. If they have to increase 20 different metrics, that means they would have 2 hours in a given work week to influence all of them. Do you think they can actually make adequate progress on all of those metrics with only 2 hours a week? It's like, no, they can't.
No.
So how do we bring this down, right, to actually give them the key metric that their role should be responsible for? So my question for you, I guess from that is, do you recommend giving some of those other metrics to the team, like giving individual contributors on the team metrics that they should be working on, even though they're not in leadership? They might not have direct influence over anything, but let me rephrase that. They can be given the responsibility of looking at these metrics, or should they just be focused on the tasks and everything else that someone else responsible in the management layer is worrying about?
No, I think that like you can break down the metrics into like babyer metrics, if that's a word, right? Like, and give them a piece of that pie so that we can hold them accountable, right? Because you want to be able to hold people accountable, right? You want to be able to say like, is this person being productive? Are they not? So for example, you're building websites, right? The project manager might be responsible for on-time deliverables. That's a very project managey metric, right? Like, let's say you're doing websites. Websites are notorious for being late, right? Like your on-time because the clients are dragging ass, the team, blah, 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 like the feedback loops, you get into revision hell because we don't have a great process. And so on-time deliverables is a great catch-all for a project manager, right? Project profitability, on-time deliverables, 2 great metrics that the project manager can be responsible for. Boom. And then let's say we have a website and we're working with a client continuously, right? Like, and you're building the website, right? So let's say you're we're going to call it full stack for the sake of, right? Like you're building a WordPress site, or you're building a whatnot site. Like as a developer, let's say if we're sending ads, or we're sending traffic, or if we're sending organic, whatever, like you're responsible for conversions, right? Like you're building a website, and if we're in the marketing world, unless we really want some creative, beautiful creative thing that isn't really converting, but it actually is for something else, right? Like you're responsible kind of for conversions. Like you can be part of like, okay, our client results, because conversions will lead to retention in theory, right? Like if we have a client for a while. So I think in that alignment of, okay, well, we want more revenue. We want clients to be retained. We're sending traffic to the site. We're building a website. If you're responsible for building it, you're responsible for conversions, right? If that's in alignment with the retention that we want for our clients. So I think everyone can get metrics as long as they're in alignment and as long as they're not distracting us from our core functions. But if they're in alignment, I'm all for everyone having metrics.
Cool. So next question. I've heard this debate before.
Ooh,
where
getting into controversy.
Yeah. So when looking at data, we have tons of tools out there that can automate everything. And so there's really nothing stopping us from just automatically pulling a lot of this data that we could look at. And then it's just going in, reviewing, and making sure that we have what we need. From the other side of the fence, there's the manual input requirement, where by me having to go look at the resources to pool this data, it means like it's guaranteed that I've actually looked at the numbers, and it becomes like a more habitual kind of process of me going and entering it into a spreadsheet. So obviously the automation side says, why would you not just do, like, you're wasting time by having to do this manually. Manual side says, yeah, but people ignore, like, if it's automated and they don't have to think about it because it's just done, then they might not be paying attention to it the same level that we are. What's your stance? Do you automate the data collection or make it manual?
I have a more process-oriented answer for you.
All right,
that's probably very on brand. So with any process, right, you have inputs and outputs. So the argument is like, if I'm an owner, like, I really should just be responsible for looking at the outputs, right? Like, I just want visibility. I don't want to be stuck in the nitty-gritty. I don't want to be in the weeds, right? This is stupid. Agree. Like, I actually truly agree. Like, I don't want owners in the weeds ever. However, the owner is making the decisions around the visibility that they want, right? They're like, so when you're building a data visualization, a data process, a data pipeline, right? Like, all these things, you're saying, okay, what is it that I want to see? Right? Do I want to see on-time deliverables? Do I want to see conversion rates for websites? Average conversion rate, like average conversion rate for all of my clients. Like what is it that what do I want to see? What do I need to stack? Right? Because if you need to aggregate all of your client stuff, then you need things for each and every single one of your clients to be able to stack it. Right? So you're responsible, right? If you're the decision maker, of like, what do you want? Even if somebody is building for you, right? You need to know what you want. And so that way, when you're looking at it and you're saying, I'm making these decisions for this year, this quarter, this month, like, you can, like, be in agreement with yourself and with the data, right? Because a lot of the times people don't trust the data, right? So they're like, they build this thing, and they're like, oh shit, this is wrong. Or like, they're like, I have to go back, into the line item, or like, I have to go into, I don't know, like Google, Meta, whatever administrator, and go see, whether or not the client's thing is doing this, right? Because I'm like, somehow data didn't pull through correctly. I don't trust it. So you have to first, like, know what you want, right? Identify what you want. Make sure that it's helping you make confident decisions. And so to your answer originally, it's like, okay, so then where are you getting the input? Usually as the owner, or as other team members, you have to do the exercise of where the data is being pulled from, right? So it's like, okay, it's getting pulled from, from our P&L. It's getting pulled from our project management system, from our CRM, from blah, blah, blah. So I would suggest that the owners spend some time, right? Even if someone on the team is going and pulling that information to say, okay, where are the inputs coming from? And verifying that so that they're not frustrated when they're just doing the visibility piece, right? And I think if you go through the exercise of saying, okay, where are my data inputs? Like, where are we pulling stuff from? Is it accurate? Or like, ooh, like our friends with the book calls right now, right? They're like, no, it's getting overwritten. Da, da, da. They didn't do the original exercise, right? Like this, like, where are we getting this stuff pulled from? Even if you're working with a data agency or whatnot, right? You're doing that exercise of identifying your data inputs right? And then making sure that it's built, right? You're reviewing the process like you would anything, right? Like if I put in a new client onboarding process, I'm usually going to have some ideas of like, how do I want it strategically? What I want it to do? Do we want video? Do we want to introduce the team? What do we want? I'm probably going to review it at the end of it, audit it. And then I'm hoping, cross my fingers, that it's going to work, right? Like, and I'm going to audit it every once in a while. Same thing with your data. Figure out what your inputs are. Make sure it's built well. You got to audit it, review it, right? And like now you're not in the weeds. You're really like just there to visibly see it, but you make that like that part of capturing it correctly part of your initial data process. So that's my process oriented kind of hybrid to answer both of those. I don't think it's one or the other.
Yeah. You're on the fence, but I still like your answer.
It's like,
it counts.
Yeah, I mean,
there doesn't have to be an answer. There's multiple ways to get anything done. So.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it's like one or the other. Like, I mean, I think long term, I don't want to be in the weeds of the data, right? Like as an owner, like I just, it's a manual task that is just not worth my time. However, to really understand where the data is coming from, I need to be part of the initial process.
Right. Yeah. Something, I was at an agency retreat recently, and one of the comments that came up was like, when your data is wrong, or even if it's only wrong once, whatever team member just had that incident where they found the wrong data, they lose trust in the entire platform that you're using. And so they stop logging into certain tools. And so even your CRM, right? We're using HubSpot. It's expensive. As soon as they try sending a marketing email and they realize, I don't actually have the information to segment my audience, or like I just sent an email to all the wrong people, but technically in our CRM, they were tagged as the right people. They don't want to ever use that again. And so, like, I guess, how frequently are you looking at data, or like making sure that the data is clean to stop having those like that waste and like losing confidence with the team on your data?
Yeah, so I think the data depends on which data it is, right? Like if you're looking at annual data, you're probably not going to like be in there every week, right? That's silly. So I think it depends on the cadence of your data, right? So what I would say is all data needs to be managed, right? I think part of the challenge is that most people think that they set it and then they forget it. And then the data is like crystal clean and that it's perfect and that it's the source of truth, right? Like it's your business oracle. However, there is maintenance and management that goes into it. Like I love using Zapier as an example, right? People are like, oh my God, we're going to put all these automations into Zapier or Make or whatnot. APIs change all the time. Right? When the API changes, your whatever Zap or whatever, integration you created is going to fail because it no longer can work with the original input. And that's going to cause errors. And either the data is not going to get pushed through. And if someone's not monitoring that, you're going to be like, oh my God, it doesn't work. Well, it's not that it doesn't work. It's that it needs to be managed. And I think that's a lot of the challenge with people. We want it to work perfectly. We're like, oh my God, I spent all this time, energy, money, blah, 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 setting this thing up, right? Whether it's HubSpot or integrations or, a visualization. Like you want the thing to just work. I'm sorry, it doesn't work that way, right? Like it has to get managed. And if it's not managed, it's going to break at some point and you don't know where it's going to break and then you don't trust it, right? So my recommendation is just set up your data, but make sure you've got someone who's reviewing it at least on a weekly basis. Or if you're a little bit more sophisticated, you can set up like error logs from your data so that you can have a visualization when it's breaking. Yep. And that's even like cooler. But again, it's a bigger lift, right? And then that way you're like, okay, the data's being managed. There's errors. We know that there is. We can go in there and we can fix them. And we're not in this sort of huge reactive mode. And now you've got a system you can trust, not just a set it and forget it Oracle.
Right. You said one phrase that I want to echo because I think it's a mindset shift that more agencies need to make. All data needs to be managed. Simple as that. It's like, have a plan for how do we make sure this data is actually clean, and we're looking at it. It feels very profound sitting from this side, having looked at so many agencies who don't do it. And so let's echo that.
Yeah. Yeah. It needs some TLC. It needs some love too. The data needs,
right.
Yeah.
But okay. Juliana, this was very insightful for it. Like, we haven't talked about this topic enough on the podcast. And I do think it's something that more agencies, there is a better chance of an agency going out of business because they don't understand data than all these other things that they act like think they should care about. Like, understanding the numbers and the information coming in is what's going to keep you functional. And so, yeah, super important topic. But I got 2 more questions for you as we wind down here. First one, what book do you recommend every agency owner should read?
I saw this one, right? And like, there's a couple of books that I love, but one of them, can I mention 2?
I'll allow it.
You'll allow it? Okay. So I think this is just because, I'm sure people have said this ad nauseum, but Built to Sell. And the reason why I like Built to Sell is because it's a tiny book. It's so easy. Even if you're super neurodivergent and you don't finish books, like, this is an easy one to finish. And it's great. And I think it's great for mindset of how to think about growing your business, like whether or not you want to sell it, whether or not you just want to leave it as a lifestyle, whether or not you want to leave it as a cash asset. I think it's just such a great book to get you in that mindset of how to create it so that it's really giving you the most value. So that's one. And then the other one that's a little bit thicker, that's a little bit bigger, is Thanks for the Feedback. I think that's just a really fun book because as you're growing your team and you're giving feedback, and you're taking feedback, which sometimes is not as fun, right? As an owner, it really allows you to, I think, manage better with such a common denominator that happens in business, which is feedback. So I love that book. And yeah, those are my 2 recommendations.
Yeah. I haven't heard of that last one, so I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, it's a great one.
Final question for you. Where can people find you?
So people can find me on Instagram. They can find me on LinkedIn. I am usually posting on LinkedIn. And the other one that I would say you can find me, but it is an occupational hazard to give people homework. However, if I know that like running an agency is really hard, and and I feel like at every level, you're getting new challenges. I always call them sexier problems, but they're still problems. And we created this awesome 360 heat map of your operations. So in 5 minutes, it's totally free. During the pandemic, we went from charging like $2,000 to making it absolutely free for everyone. And you can sit down and get a holistic 360 view of your entire operations, including your metrics. So when we talk today about data, and if you're kind of curious, where you are and where you stand, and then you can benchmark it against, other like 800 agencies that have done it, which is really neat, right? So like not only where you're at, but how you stack up to other people in your revenue level. So I would recommend that you definitely take a chance and take a look at that. It's at scaletime.co/scalemap, and you can figure out 50 ops, sort of gains and gaps in 5 minutes, and usually saves people around like 5 hours a week just with the awareness of doing it and the heat map that they get back. So
awesome.
Find me there.
Yeah. And we'll get that linked up in the show notes as well. But awesome. Juliana, thanks for joining.
Thank you so much. I had so much fun talking to your audience. So thank you, guys.
That's the show, everyone. You can leave a rating and review, or you can do something that benefits you. Click the link in the show notes to subscribe to Agency Forward on Substack. You'll get weekly content, resources, and links from around the internet to help you drive your agency forward.